Aliens Colonial Marines is a tale that you can't not revisit when thinking about video game disasters. It had all the potential in the world when it was announced back in December 2006. It was being developed by Gearbox, who had proven themselves after the release of the critically acclaimed Borderlands. The reveal gameplay trailer that they showed looked pretty good, and everything seemed to indicate that this could very well be an awesome HD Aliens game. But then, over 6 years later, on February 12th, 2013, the game launched, marred by downgraded graphics, poor overall performance and lack of optimization, unacceptable bugs and glitches, shitty AI, general lack of tension and atmosphere, lackluster first-person shooting mechanics, repetitive gameplay and missions, a measly 4 hours long campaign with a disappointing story, and more. It's pretty much universally agreed upon that this game was, plain and simply, a bad, generic, and unpolished shit turd of a game. Now, Gearbox CEO Randy Pitchford has tried to no avail to defend this mess and avert any blame over the years, living in a fantasy land where he believes that the game is actually good. Any criticisms addressed towards him about the game would either be ignored or blocked on Twitter, with a prime example being the famous game critic Jim Sterling, who utterly brutalized this game. Not only did Jim point out everything that was wrong with it, he also pointed out how Randy Pitchford was taking no responsibility, only listening to compliments while ignoring complaints. Jim also noticed that there were these weird Twitter accounts that were suspiciously set up at around the same time that Aliens Colonial Marines launched and seemed intent on praising the game, the only types of responses that Randy Pitchford was willing to give his attention to. Then there was the whole debacle with money allegedly being averted from Aliens development to make Borderlands 2, but that's a whole other topic to talk about. The bottom line is this: Aliens Colonial Marines was falsely advertised, it sucked when it came out, and it got called out, and Randy Pitchford handled it in the most immature way possible. Fast forward 4.5 years later after the game's launch, and Randy Pitchford is back at it again, unwilling to listen to criticism and making some of the worst excuses I have ever heard. The following information comes from website IGN, who recently interviewed Randy Pitchford in episode 23 of their show Unfiltered. When asked about Aliens Colonial Marines, the answers that he gave were pathetic, to say the least. Check out IGN for the full interview, but here are the highlights that are pertinent to this video.
I want to talk a little bit about Aliens now.
Okay.
Did Fox come to you, or did you pitch Fox for Alien? I'm just kind of curious as to the origin of it.
My partner, Brian Martell, made a list of IP that he would like to try, and the number one thing on his list was Alien. No, we didn't call it Fox at all. It was actually Sega that put it all together. That was a slog. That was a slog of a development. The thing that frustrated me most, we hadn't even signed the deal yet. Like the ink was, or maybe we did, the ink was barely dry on the contract. And Sega and Fox had to make an announcement. It's like, we hadn't even written a line of code yet. And it's Alien, and there's Fox, and there's Sega, and there's us, and it just like, the problem is always expectation management. And we didn't even know what the hell we were doing yet. We hadn't even written the first line of code.
Yeah.
And now people already designed the game they wanted in their own heads. We were fucked before we started. And I won't make that mistake again. Like every deal we've done since then, we've had a lot more control over when announcements could be made. After I did the James Bond game, this is a big mistake I made. After I did the James Bond game, but I told myself I'll never do another deal with a movie. And then I fucking went ahead and did one with...
But it was number one on your list.
It was number one on the list. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything.
You described it as a slog. Was it a bad sign in hindsight that it felt like a slog?
No, I mean no.
What did that game need in the end?
I think what it needed, and I'm proud of the game, and I really liked it. I think there was a couple things. One, it was probably one of those 7.5 kind of games, 7.5 kind of games, 7.5 kind of games that came out right after we did Borderlands. And so everybody wanted a 9. It had all this expectation. It's one of those expectation management things. So if you want a 9 and you expect a 9 and you give people a 7, then they give you a 5 because it's like punitive and there's a punitive kind of thing there. So it was like a 7.5 game, which I think would have been fine for an Aliens game. But it could have been a little tighter. I told Maida-san, if you want the best game possible, you need to give us as much time as possible after we ship Borderlands 2 before it comes out. And I think Sega just didn't think they were just at the end of their rope. I think they just did not have the runway. I wasn't asking for more money for them, but I think they were so, I don't know what the pressures were on their side. I was actually investing our money we'd made in Borderlands. I was investing in the game trying to give it a chance. Like, we launched Borderlands 2, what was it, October of 2012? And he was saying, no, it's got to be a holiday 2012 title. It's like, you're fucking crazy. And so retail, fortunately, wanted it outside of the holiday because there were too many big games in the holiday. So that bought us a couple more months into February. But if that game would have been like an April, May game, like if you play the game now, like the patched version compared to what launched, it's like night and day on so many respects. And that, like, we just did that. And I'm talking about just polishing. The game's the same game.
Yeah.
On the PC, the team made the decision, usually on PC, we launch with really high fidelity materials. They made the decision to launch with perfect parity on all the platforms.
Yeah.
People that want the most high-end experience, they weren't happy about that. And then, there were little usual bugs and stuff. There were a lot of people that wanted a suspense game. That was the other thing, right? Everyone had their own version of the game they wanted.
Yeah.
So you have some group of people, it's like, man, this should have been like Alien and not Aliens, and they wanted the suspense game. And that's how entertainment works, You're going to get judged not on what you're trying to do, but what on people think you should be doing.
Well, you talk about unrealistic expectations and managing expectations. Is the vertical slice now is that one of those things you're never going to show ever again? Because that's, when it was first shown, there was this sort of higher bar that was put out there for people.
I don't know. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I don't subscribe to that. I don't think that's the issue. I think because the reality is, here's what that argument's about.
Yeah.
Wow, Gearbox is great. I expect this.
Yep.
Aliens is great. Gearbox is great. I expect this. And then I play the thing. God, it's not that. Something must have gone wrong. It couldn't be that they just didn't entertain us as well as they did. Because if they wanted to entertain us, they really would have. So there was this whole conspiracy theory that things were faked or there were different engines. Like, it just didn't make any sense.
Well, there was. If you go back, the original thing that was shown and then the final version, I guess things happen in development. You gotta tweak, you gotta tone down and balance. And that seemed like a big part of the problem.
The differences were, there was one video somebody did online where they're like, they did the comparison. It was fucking stupid shit. There was like one case where you're walking through the umbilical and a body smashes against the umbilical, and like in one earlier view of it, there was like a lot of glass shattering and there was some other stuff, and one of the designers decided, I'm going to tone down that glass shattering effect because I like seeing this. It had nothing to. It was just individual artist decisions in the course of making the painting, right? But that like people looking for something were blowing that up. But like the differences, in my opinion, were trivial or minor. When the game at the end is something everybody or the group think says this is great, then you forget all the differences and you forget. It's like, oh, the differences made it better. If the group think is this isn't fun, then that's a crime. Any difference anyone pointed to could have been done without any difference at all, and it would not have changed the results. Yeah. The feelings people had are relative to the expectations, and none of those changes would have mattered. Like, I remember the first time I saw Half-Life 2 demonstrated, there was like this awesome scene with the tentacle, and like none of that was in the game, but the game was awesome, so it didn't matter. The differences aren't the issue.
Were you surprised by the backlash when Aliens
came
out?
There were some other things that didn't help too. Sega decided to do a CG pre-rendered kind of trailer. I don't want to get into it, but they decided to run those, and we wished they didn't. And then like they got whacked in the UK.
Wait, what is this? I'm not sure what you're talking about.
There was like a
false
commercial
advertising type of thing.
I don't know how it works. That's not my world.
Do you have to say like at the bottom, like do like
I
a
don't
disclaimer?
know. I don't know. Again, I don't know. That's not my world. Some organization in the UK looks at this stuff and says, la la. They did it for the Alien game later, and Sega said, okay, we'll pay you off. And that was happening at the same time that all the conspiracy theory stuff was happening. And then there was some other claim that somebody had made. It was complete fiction. The conspiracy they created was the game would have been good, the game would have been great, but Gearbox diverted money that was meant to be for the Aliens game to the Borderlands game. No, we actually invested money we made off of Borderlands into Aliens. We spent way more than Sega ever gave us, and we still got the results that we got, right? So it's like way more embarrassing. Like we actually tried and it didn't work out the way we wished. The hurtful thing though of like stealing or anything, the indictment on the integrity, that hurt. It's just dishonest. I remember, what's the name of that guy? He's the journalist guy. His thing is he's always mad. He's a big dude. He's got a British accent. He's got a hard on for me. I can't remember that guy.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
He's a journalist. He's kind of big. He's got a British accent, and he's always angry.
Right, Randy, do you wanna do this? You know how you like to talk about what a big man I am? You'll find out how big if you step and I just fucking steamroll you.
Anyway, every time we launch a game, since Twitter happened, there's people that go, I love it, right? So I just retweet whatever. Sure. I was just retweeting people that on launch day, there's a lot of people turns out there's a lot of people that really love Aliens. And I was retweeting those. And this guy, he had given the game like a 1 or a 2 out of 10. Like he had just that's just, come on. But he's looking for hits or whatever. He's pretty much the guy that furthered the whole conspiracy theory stuff more than ever. He couldn't believe that people would like the game. So, and I was retweeting all the people that were telling me they liked the game. So he then made a story up that I had created the Twitter accounts and made the post and was retweeting like
sock puppet accounts.
So here was a guy who was so motivated to further this claim that I was a liar that he was willing to lie himself to try to convince people that I was a liar. Like that fried. I was like, what the? And that hurts.
Do you ever try to reach out and like make peace with a guy?
I don't
like
have
that,
time.
Or you just don't even.
I don't care. I'm making games,
Yeah,
So I blocked it and just I'm moving on. And honestly, the other thing I did is like, man, that's cool. I'm in that dude's head. Because I'll tell you the worst thing, if you're an entertainer, is when people don't care. Our literal purpose for being on Earth is just to try to create joy and happiness for other people. Like we exist to just try to create joy and happiness. There's a bell curve of responses. There's always a group of extreme people up here that are like, they love it more than anything in the universe. Mm-hmm. And there's always the people down here that hate it more than anything in the universe. But if you reach millions of people, you're gonna have thousands of outliers on either end. And it's insane.
Isn't this guy just about one of the scummiest bullshitters you've ever seen? The main culprit, Randy says, was expectation. As he put it, they gave us a 9 with Borderlands, so we expected a 9, so when they gave us a 7, we gave it a 5. What? He also attributed the game's negative reception to how everyone designed their own version of this Aliens game inside their heads, saying that as a result, they were fucked before they started.
We were fucked before we started.
Well, first things first, Randy, the game's lower than a 5. Let's get that out of the way. The fact that you think this game is remotely close to a 7 or 7.5 goes to show how deluded and irresponsible you are. It's a bad game, man. Like, you gotta accept that. It's not about high expectations or gamers designing their own versions of the game in their heads. The game just didn't even meet the lowest of expectations. Like, yes, he's not entirely wrong when he says that everyone has their own vision of what a game should be and all that. Like with Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, a lot of people had their own vision of what the game should have been, but they got something else instead, which led to disappointment. And I get that. But in order to get people to start thinking at that level, the game needs to at least be technically and fundamentally decent first. But Aliens Colonial Marines wasn't even that. It was just a technically and fundamentally flawed, bad mess of a game that completely oversold itself with false advertising. Like, if they said we can expect apple pie but then gave us cherry pie instead, the cherry pie needs to be decent first before I can think about, wait a minute, but I wanted apple pie. If the cherry pie was actually good, I might consider saying, well, at least the pie was good, it's not what I wanted, but it actually, I didn't have a bad time with it either. But if the cherry pie is shit, then I don't care what kind of pie you gave me, it's just a shit pie. And so what if we had expectations? Since when did that become a sin? Especially when it was your team, Randy, that showed us the game that we should expect and then promptly proceeded to not deliver on it. But no, apparently these comparison videos showing a vastly superior pre-release build versus the vastly inferior final build is stupid stupid shit.
Did the comparison. It was fucking stupid shit.
Apparently, the differences are negligible. Well, guess what, Randy? Here's a message from your own game. This guy is so clearly insecure about himself that he can't admit his own mistakes. He spends most of the interview blaming everyone and everything else. He blames Sega for not giving them enough time, which is bullshit because the game had been in development for over 6 years. He blames the audience for expecting too much or for visualizing their own version of the game in their heads, which is so pathetically misguided. And he even proceeds to single out one man in the cringiest way possible.
I remember, what's the name of that guy? He's the journalist guy. His thing is he's always mad. He's a big dude. He's got a British accent. He's got a hard on for me. I can't remember that guy.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
He's a journalist. He's kind of big. He's got a British accent, and he's always angry.
Don't be a fucking child. Just say his name. His name is Jim Sterling, and you damn well know who this man is. Hell, you've tweeted at the guy before, and according to Jim Sterling, the two even sat down for a face-to-face interview. You also know for a fact, Randy, that he called you out on your bullshit time and again, and you're so salty about it that you can't even muster up the balls to say his name. It is childish and pathetic. I also love how he says that he doesn't care about this guy, that he's moving on, he blocked him on Twitter and all that, but promptly proceeds to bring him up and talk about him throughout a good chunk of the interview. He also makes passive-aggressive remarks like,
but you know, he's looking for hits or whatever. Man, that's cool. I'm in that dude's head.
Well, Randy, A, he didn't just look for hits, he got him because he exposed your bullshit with competence, and B, from where I'm sitting, it seems to me as though it is Jim Sterling who is still inside your head. If anything, it's you who's got a hard-on for him. But what was his name, right? I don't know what else to say. The interview speaks for itself. This was one of the cringiest and scummiest responses I've seen from a game developer. This guy talks about how everyone else is lying to convince the world that he's the liar, but frankly, Randy's done a pretty good job of that himself with his utterly moronic excuses. If anything, it's Randy who is lying to himself to cope with his own insecurities, and it is pitiful. Whatever, let the poor man be, let him believe whatever he wants to believe. Let him live in his own fantasy land because here in the real world, Randy, we know what's up. In no small part, thanks to Jim Sterling.
Thank God for me, Jim fucking Sterling's son.
Anyway, with that, I would like to end this news update and discussion video. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon for a chance to chat with me on Discord, to play games with me, get your name in my videos, and more. All contributions will go towards remaining 100% independent. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.